So one of first is put a context to what we believe at Chengdu Studio, what mass market entertainment is. We think that means good marketing or marketing awareness plus fun. So based on that context, I'm going to start from what is the traditional marketing perspective. Marketing means you need to have a good product, good price point, promotion, standard things. So I'm going to go over it from this framework. Okay. One, what is our products? Well, we had actually two steps in learning how to do well in social games. One was a game you probably never heard of, Castle & Co. on Facebook. The other one was the Smurfs & Co., which was launched on Facebook. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about that later. Second, obviously, on most of the Facebook social games, the price is for free. But if you play long enough and you're very interested, there's microtransactions as always, and we do that as well. Now, how do we promote? Well, promotion is probably one of the key things now to get above the noise in any of the social or mobile games apps today. So if you don't have it, it's going to be very hard to succeed, and many of you who've tried probably know this very well. So we rely on SNS channels, we do email blasting, cross-promotion, viral ads. A few of the presentations before I mentioned all this stuff, so I'm not going to go into in detail. Just saying you need it, okay, to be successful. Okay, and then a place of where you actually do this, okay? In our perspective, it's all online. It's on the social networks itself, okay? And one of the reasons why I present this is we didn't just do it for Facebook, okay? We did it for a lot of other Asian territories, including Naver, Nate, and Mixi. Cyworld is Nate, by the way, if you don't know. And we are actually, later on, I'll discuss, we're also expanding into other Asian territories as well, okay? So, what was our strategy? Well, I want to put a little context on things. First of all, Ubisoft Chengdu never made games before. It's a startup studio 4 years ago with everybody who are college graduates, led by only a couple or a few senior management team members. Okay, so for us, we adopted a methodology, what we call try, learn, and apply our learnings. Okay, it's the very, very typical way of doing things. I think this happens to work well in the upcoming types of technologies. Doesn't work well, let's say, making a AAA game, but works well in the social space because it's new. It works well in the mobile space because it's new. As you get further down the chain of maturity, I think that will be very difficult to do. So our trial was Castle & Co. Okay, we learned from it, and we did Smurfs & Co. Okay, and we'll talk about this process a bit. Okay, so Castle & Co. was our first social game at Ubisoft Chengdu. We decided to use City Builder, and obviously the gameplay is casual. Okay, so, but what was the fun? Well, why do we pick City Builder? Well, it was one of the most popular genres at the time. It was easiest for us to learn. Sometimes learning a good way is copying. I'm not going to deny it. We do copy to learn, but understanding how that game is fun is very important as well. So just copying for the sheer sake of copying isn't good enough. Okay, we knew because we were going to target a more worldwide audience, we wanted to be a much more cuter style than some of the typical casual games you see. When I say cuter from an Asian audience perspective, because we were working in Chengdu, it was very easy to have artists to do that. So Castle & Co. was our first introduction to making cutesy art. Okay, and we provided this gameplay freedom, this play a sandbox that people can create their own worlds and display that worlds to people. Okay, and that's pretty much the gameplay. Okay, but we made a lot of mistakes, and I want to talk a little bit about some of the mistakes we learned. One is we didn't understand when we did Castle & Co. how important virality was. It was less than, I think, 4%, or maybe it's even less than that on that chart. I'm sorry, I don't remember, but it's really, really low for our first game. Okay, and that can kill your game without virality. Okay, and this was at the time when Facebook still supported a lot of viral mechanisms, and we had very, very subpar performance on virality. Okay, we relied heavily on ads, cross promotions, and being featured app on Facebook. Okay, and we were a featured app mainly because we were Ubisoft. So if we weren't Ubisoft, I don't think they would have featured us at all. Okay, so we also learned that we didn't have the right monetization hooks. So, and there was a couple of problems with that. One was we were featured on Facebook because we made a deal with Facebook to only use Facebook credits. But at that time, Facebook when they were launching credits, had a lot of 0 credits in their system as a promotion for Facebook credits. And that pretty much meant no monetization for us because we couldn't tell if we were going to get real money or not, and found out it was like 90% fake real money, which is they used their credits, but it was all the free credits. And then we didn't have good monetization features, and obviously because we got no money, pretty hard to keep on advertising because that cost a lot, so we weren't going to be in the business of losing money. So it was not a good experiment, okay? The other thing was, because it was our first experiment and we're just kind of learning, we decided to be very, very small and conservative on the team and development cycle. So I think we did it in 6 weeks making this game, okay? And obviously we didn't have enough content, therefore hard retention, you know, the drill, okay? And we were a junior team, which actually in retrospect wasn't so bad because they were very motivated, but at the same time we didn't know anything, okay? But that helped us learn to be for Smurfs & Co. When we did this, the funny thing is, we were the most successful Ubisoft game internally developed as a rookie studio. We had the most installed users, 500,000 MAU at its peak, okay, versus the next runner-up, Ubisoft, which was like 30,000, okay? So because of that, Ubisoft recognized we had some success. Because of that, also Ubisoft is interested in continuing learning, and we have very good relationships with acquiring IP. So we acquired using the Smurfs IP with the same mentality of making a city building game, okay, applying our learning. So what did we do? Well, it's our second game, but the same team. That's very important. You know, if you learn and you didn't use the same team, it's kind of pointless. We still stuck with City Builder Casual. We added a Smurfs IP, okay? We did a much longer development cycle, although still short in the realm of Facebook development today. It was 4 months, so you know we had a lot of increase in time, but still pretty short. Okay, and we added a lot of monetization mechanics like energy gameplay, and we made sure we could launch in multiple territories at the same time. There's something else we kind of learned in retrospect that if we didn't prepare for that, that was harder later. Okay, so that's a screenshot of the Smurfs & Co. And why did we pick the Smurfs IT? One of the things we realized in Castle & Co. was we did a no-name IP. There was no recognition. Even though we had really cutesy ads and what have you, at the end of the day, it did not convert into a lot of paid, the paid installs were very low, even though we had a lot of exposure. Smurfs solved that problem, okay? And I can tell you this in a big way, okay? So it's known by everybody. If you're 40 years old or plus, you know the Smurfs, okay? You grew up with the damn commercials and the cartoons, okay? And for our target audience, which we learned from Castle & Co., and as some other presenters have stated, a lot of the big whales are female and 40 plus. So it was really good bridge of IP to the player base, okay? We also had the luxury of the movie release. We timed our game to be released at the movie, so we got a lot of updraft from that, okay? We had strong partnerships, okay? We had good dealings with Sony. We had good dealings with the IP holder itself, okay? LaFig. And we really learned how to adapt our games for a lot of social networks at that point. Castle & Co. also launched in a lot of Asian territory SNS and other types of SNS platforms. So we really understood how to make sure we can launch on multiple platforms quickly, okay? So, and as I mentioned over this, these are all the reasons why Smurfs was picked and why it was successful, okay? So because of this, and because of the fact that we learned about virality, we made sure our game was really viral this time. This is a time when Facebook decided to start clamping down on virality, okay? And we still increased our virality a lot. It was more than half our installs now were based on virality alone, okay? We flipped it, okay, from what we learned before, okay? And we relied very little on the featured, okay? And the other comes from people going like Googling Smurf. Or you know, doing search on Smurfs on Facebook. So there was a lot of awareness of Smurfs, the brand, tied in the movie, and we had a lot of people just come blindly through the installs of just going, hey, I heard about Smurfs, and they just typed in a search box or what have you, okay? And in the first month that you saw, we skyrocketed from the movie launch date to 10 million MAU peak, okay, in about a month, okay? Now, the virality was, again, because of A, we used a very popular brand, but also B, because our mechanics in the game really supported it now, okay? And we learned a lot from that. So we had things like making sure you invited friends. We had cross-promotion bars, okay? We had better monetization. Now that Facebook credits were flushed out, the free credits were flushed out of the system, we really got real Facebook credits now, okay? And it was good timing for us, okay? Facebook at this time was experimenting with something called frictionless credits. I'm not sure if you ever noticed, prior to frictionless credits, you had literally 3 pop-ups to confirm, are you going to purchase something? Well, right at the time when Smurfs released, they actually introduced a one-click buy, no confirmation, okay? And trust me, that works really beautifully, okay? So, of course, we had some complaints from parents that, you know, they kind of clicked and didn't really mean to purchase something, but that was still very low in terms of return requests. At the end, it helped. The whole energy, that you run out of energy, is a really great way to monetize. As a matter of fact, is our #1 monetization thing. I think most games now, you see energy for a reason, because it's a great way for people to monetize, okay? And obviously, the traditional pay-to-skip discounts, I think none of this is new. It's just that we did it right with the right IP. That's all it is I'm saying here, okay? Obviously, our teams were more experienced. And the most important thing is we learned from Castle & Co. how to integrate with all these other platforms and the platform specificities about each one of them, what worked and didn't work, that we made sure we got to apply it with Smurfs, okay? So, and we launched making sure we had all 6 key languages we wanted, and then we added South Korean and simplified Chinese later, okay? And I'll talk about that in a bit, okay? So we also added a quest system, and we made sure we had a better post-launch. Remember, I said for Castle & Co., we didn't know if it's going to work well. So what we decided to do is a very small team. In the traditional game publisher way, we would scale down the team after launch. Okay, this is at least a very traditional game developer thinking. So during pre-launch for Smurfs, we had 17 people. For post-launch, we almost doubled it, okay, to 33 people. Okay, so it's very, very important to keep in mind that live games require more content, more people. If you really want to make a lot of money, you actually have to possibly increase your content creation capability, feature creation capability after launch, okay? Now, obviously, if your business model doesn't support it, you got to rethink the situation, but ours did, so it made sense, you know, at that point. Okay, so what did we achieve? This is just a pat on the back for myself and my team. It is the #1 licensed game, not a licensed game on Facebook, meaning that it's a licensed IP that wasn't based on a game IP. Okay, it was obviously the most successful Ubisoft game. At our height, at our peak, we had 10 million MAU, 1.4 million DAU. We reached the top 25 apps on Facebook at one point. You know, that changes constantly, obviously. Okay, so some things we learned based on each of the SNS networks, what works and doesn't work, and we're going to talk a little bit about each one. One is Facebook does have a global network audience, which is great. Okay, it's definitely the strongest SNS in terms of virality. If you're relying a lot on virality, Facebook is your #1 target SNS. All other SNSs around the world have less virality than Facebook, for sure. Okay, and it's definitely a very mature gaming platform versus most of the other ones, which means that all the advanced APIs you would rely on to do things is going to be there flushed out. Okay. It has the best install ratio in terms of paid acquisition. Okay. Now, we also launched a Mixi. Mixi is the leading Japanese web-based SNS platform. Okay. And I want to stress that because we learned some lessons about that. One is they have about 80% market share, but their platform discourages virality. They, as a matter of fact, don't have as many APIs and capabilities to do viral mechanism as Facebook. You need to know that. If your game relies on virality on Mixi, you're going to have problems. Okay? And mobile is your #1 social platform in Japan. So we picked the wrong platform, okay? We also didn't have companion mobile app at the time. We are actually working on that now, but a little late in the process. So again, if you're thinking about going to Japan, you better make sure you have a mobile version. Okay, very mobile ready version of it, because that's where most of your social networks are going to be having success. Okay, but you have very, very loyal players, very high conversion rates. Okay, when they really like your game. Okay, which is great, and they stay much longer than your typical Facebook players. Okay, but very, very expensive to acquire these users. Okay, very, very expensive. Okay. And the platform is engineered to be pro-user. So anything where user complains, that you can think about them complaining in that culture, the platform will probably do something about that. Okay? So what I mean is privacy is a big issue. No spamming is a big issue. So you have to think about how does your game mechanics have to deal with those things. And it's not just Mixi. All the other platforms in Japan also have this view because that's the society's view on things. So you have to really understand how to, adapt your game to work in that kind of environment. Which why I suggest to a lot of people don't try Japan first as your major Asian entry. It's actually probably one of the toughest ones. Okay. Now we also had experience with Naver and Nate. Okay. Naver is popular in Korea. It's an emerging SNS platform. Okay, and one of the things I want to stress to you, in terms of sheer numbers, okay, when I can get 10 million players on Smurfs in Facebook, I can get a very small fraction of it in, let's say, Japan, like 30,000, okay, and 30,000 in Naver. I just want to make sure you understand this, okay? Your biggest number of user acquisitions will also come from Facebook, okay? But you can make some very reasonable money on these other platforms, but understand the differences, okay? Korean users tend to play longer. That's what we've seen on both Smurfs & Co. and Castle & Co. It's a very immature market in a lot of ways, meaning their platform is nothing close to Facebook. You probably spend more time engineering, debugging problems because we never thought about doing that. Even though it's been available for 2 years at Facebook, doesn't matter. They don't really look at that. They do their own thing. They listen to their customers, meaning the game developers, which is a good thing in that sense. If we say we want to do this, there's a higher likelihood they actually will do it for us because we're kind of like the leading publisher on the South Korean SNS platforms right now. So they'll take more of our advice and we get more things from them, while when I ask Facebook for something, it's like 0 chance, okay, of getting something, okay? So Naver is a good starting platform, but again, 10 million, 30,000, okay? But higher conversion paying users. It shouldn't be your primary market unless you really know that market well. We have peaked at #1 on both our titles in there, so it tells you how small the market is. Okay, but they really support helping your game launch if they really like your game. Okay, there was a YouTube video they did to show Smurfs & Co. and there's these 2 cute girls kind of walking through how to play that game for 10 minutes. I was like, wow, I was impressed because I wouldn't get anything like that from Facebook for sure now. We had to do our own type of viral marketing. Okay, we also are planning to do a few things with the Smurfs & Co. So we continue learning. We're continuing learning on a lot of things. We're going to continue releasing in Korea. There's another platform called Nate that we're just going to release soon. We're also going to release in China, and I'll talk about that if you want to ask questions later. We have learned a bit there, and other networks later to be announced. Okay, so some key takeaways. Make sure you always think about localization, but not in the traditional sense of localization. You have to think about how your content pipeline can be adaptable and changeable for each of your target audiences, okay? Meaning your art style changing, having certain types of features that may not work in other SNS platforms. For instance, if you're going to launch a Mixi, you have to understand you have certain features that won't work there. What are you going to do to compensate for that, okay? You also have regulatory issues. Okay, every country has certain regulatory issues with online games, and you have to adapt to those things. And a lot of things people don't think about. Okay. Like I said, Facebook has your strongest viral mechanism, so you have to downplay virality in other territories, and you have to find other ways to get virality equivalents if you plan to use a global mass market game. Okay. SNS policies I mentioned already. I also talk about features. The other thing is if you design it right, and it took a couple tries to do it, your cost integration should be very, very low because now you know what works and doesn't work in each platform. Your engineers should be able to adapt accordingly. But if you didn't get exposure to a test kind of game, which is why I always suggest everybody who's going to do these other markets, do a small test game. Don't bet your cash cow on something. Learn all those things so your team understands it and is aware of it, so that when you do your cash cow game, then you can really engineer it and design it to fit all this global mass market SNS, okay? And player behaviors do differ, but as a lot of people have mentioned, play is universal, but the context of the play may be different, okay? And you need to understand the differences, okay? And I want to quickly finish to give some time for Q&A because I think that's where I'm most engaging and capable of helping. So if anybody wants to ask questions, I'll be please raise your hand and ask away, and then I'll try to answer it. Go ahead. Yes. Oh, you want more details? Okay. So we are working with a distributor that we built a relationship with for a few years. The company is called Bihan. B-I-H-A-N. They are a distributor of online games in China. They're located in Shanghai. I can give you the contact information you're interested in. One thing in China you have to be aware of, you cannot operate games yourself there, okay? There's a lot of strict rules about what can or can't be done. And although social games and mobile games are sort of like in the gray area, you can be sure that Chinese lawmakers will retroactively instill certain types of traditional game laws they have into those markets as well. So we decided to use a distributor whose job is to kind of work with all the major operators, SNS platform operators and casual game operators, to launch our game for us. Okay, you will need a partner in China. There is no other way to do it. Okay, to do it successfully. If you're talking about high visibility, high amount of revenue generation. If you're a very small game, I'll use GameForge's example. GameForge launched O-Game, I can think about 5 years ago in China. But in the very small load scale perspective, yeah, you can get away with that. It's a great way to learn. Okay? But if you're Ubisoft or you're whatever, and you're launching, you're targeting for 1 million MAU plus, there's no way you can be under the radar. You better use a partner. Otherwise, you will find Chinese legal system never going to be in your favor. So, okay. Next question. Okay. I think I'm done. If you want to talk separately, I'll sit right back next to Chris there. And I'm going to just give Chris a chance to come back. Am I on schedule? All right. I have what? I have 15 minutes? Okay, more questions, please, ask. Otherwise, I'll tell a story. So if you ever want to come to China, one thing you should be aware of is I highly recommend, one, you have a Chinese friend, no matter who. Because if you go to Shanghai, maybe it's okay, but you need a Chinese friend for a few reasons. You think you can use English to go somewhere, okay? Trust me, that's not the case, okay? So if you've ever been in China, trust me when I say you need Chinese language skills, okay? And the best friend you can have is an iPhone, okay? iPhone, Google Translate, you know, an address, Google Map, that'll help. So if you ever come to China, I'm your friend now. So come get a card later and I can help you navigate China a bit, okay? And Chris, I was just stalling for you to get back. So did I do a good job? Okay, great. I give another chance for everybody to have any other questions. I am much better at answering questions than doing presentations.
Please use the microphone.
Yeah. Right there. Next slide. Yeah, there you go.
this is a question regarding China. I
Yep.
understand about 2 years ago, the U.S. took the Chinese government to the WTO and won the case regarding games and movies and so on. Can you elaborate more on that? What's the follow-up on that?
I know it's still in progress. You know, discussions with China is always going to take long by default, okay? So I don't know any more than what you stated, but the U.S. is basically trying to encourage China to open up more of what they call the entertainment industries. They were focusing more on music and movies, but in extension, games fall into this category, allowing more proper free trade, okay? So some people, some lawyers thought that because of that opportunity that, you know, Western companies can have an active role in actually operating games in China in the near future. The honest truth is nothing has changed since that meeting. What has happened is more movies have been accepted to be played in China. I'm not sure if you understand the rules in China. China actually has to approve every movie that comes into the country. Okay? And they used to have like less than 20 movies, international movies, that was allowed to come every year. And now I think it's doubled or something like that. Okay? But in terms of game operations, that rule has not been lifted. Game operations is very clear. Chinese partner owning 51% of the operations company must be involved to operate a game in China. Okay? Simple as that. Why I said social games, especially web games and mobile games, are a little bit weird right now is that rule doesn't apply to it yet because of two reasons. One is if you try to do a web-based game, you probably can't get the traffic like SNS, Casual Game Network, or some company like Tencent to get those users. So they haven't really looked at that part of the law. Theoretically, if you just get a web operating license, you can operate a web game in China and collect revenue. Okay, so that's how early companies like GameForge have successfully launched O-Game in China. But at the same time, you can't get the million-plus MAUs. So is it really worth the effort? Well, since you have to work with operators that are already Chinese-owned, okay, then it's not really been a big deal. So to this day that I'm aware of, you cannot launch a game successfully in China without working with one of the major operators. You can try on a small scale to learn, but at the end of the day, you won't get much money out of it. The big money is going to come from working with the major operators because they have the marketing reach to the consumer that you need to get the money. Okay, so and that's one of the premises of what my slide was. You need the marketing reach for mass market. Okay, there's no other way around it. Okay, there's just too many games out there. Okay, so okay, any other questions? Now am I on schedule? Okay, great. Chris is going to introduce the next player. You can tell me, ask me questions offline. Thank you.